We're in the midst of a huge transformation where our peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, she, her, and hers, and I'm the Senior Partnerships Manager here at AllVoices. Today, I am very excited to welcome our next guest onto the interview series, Victoria Hill. She is the Director of Diversity and Social Impact at Advanced Group. Victoria, thank you so much for being here. If you want to share a little bit about yourself for our listeners, including your pronouns, and when you were younger, do you remember how you answered the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Yes. Hi, Christina. Thank you so much for inviting me. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I am the diversity, equity, and inclusion leader. And because I have such a passion for people and making sure everyone feels included, this is like the perfect position for me. My entire life, I've always been an introvert. And some people laugh and say, no, Victoria, you're an extrovert. But seriously, I'm an introvert. And I've kind of like self excluded myself from others, conversations, different events. So as a child, I decided I wanted to do something where I could really make sure everyone's voice was heard and that everyone felt included. Since growing up, I was always the excluded one. So I thought about being maybe a teacher when I was growing up, and I thought that would accomplish including like all voices.
Yeah, it's really important to make sure that folks feel like they belong in the spaces that they're in, and also, having the opportunity to hear from and actively listen to all voices is definitely something that we believe in here as well. Thank you for sharing kind of a little bit about your foundation for your current role too. I would love to jump into the topic of it's in the title of the interview series, kind of this dynamic thing of company culture with all the changes happening in the workforce on a daily basis. Positive company culture is pretty consistent in terms of what folks are really looking for, being empowered to do their best work. Do you
Mhm.
think that the easiest way to improve upon company culture is to really remove workplace issues? Why or why not?
Well, I don't think that's the easiest way to improve culture because as humans, we're just diverse by nature. We think differently, we learn differently, we deal with pressure differently. So we're just so different. And that's what always brings like issues or conflict into the workplace. But in my opinion, I think the best way to create that positive culture would be making sure all voices are being heard and then actions are being taken as appropriate because we can hear voices, right? But if we don't take action, then sometimes it's for naught, right? And also making sure that people feel like they belong and are represented. I also train our staff on a training called Resolving Conflict Through Dialogue. And it really helps employees get on the same page by setting clear expectations and creating that good line of communication. And so when issues arise, then we talk about how can you communicate so that the issues can not necessarily be avoided altogether, but just resolving that conflict so you can really create a more positive culture.
Yeah, because we know that with any relationship, whether it's, outside of work, inside of work, conflict is bound to happen. And you can really think about how you're going to navigate it, think about the dialogue, the conversations. And to your earlier point as well, actively listening is really important because if you do not
Mhm.
demonstrate that or you don't act, you're probably not going to get that feedback or, hear from people's thoughts again because you lose that sense of
Exactly.
trust and psychological safety as well. In terms of just thinking about the role of work in our lives and employers, what role do both public and private employers play in really creating and having an impact in creating more equity in the world at large?
Well, employers play a huge role. And I would say one of the top roles in creating more equity in this world. I mean, equity to me means simply access. Employers should be leading by example and giving their employees access and opportunities for a better life, for a better world. Equity doesn't mean like having the same thing, being equal. Equity means that employees should be treated fairly based on their individual needs. And that's so important for employers. We spend, most of our lives at work.
Absolutely. I think the stat is on average, people spend like a third of their lives, not including sleeping, working. So,
Mhm.
really
Yeah.
doing our best to be intentional and as coworkers, teammates, and also leaders as well. I would love to talk about advanced group. And we know that one study found that right now, with all of the changes, 47% of employees reported that their stress was higher than anything they'd previously experienced in their career, and only 37% really agreed that their organization understood what they needed both in their personal lives and for their families. How are you and the team really showing up for the full lives of employees at Advanced Group?
Well, this is why I really, really love my job as a diversity leader in the organization because I'm able to help alleviate some of those work-related stressors. For instance, we have a platform that has many different services, but they support our employees like emotional, mental, and physical well-being. We also provide surveys so we can understand the pulse of our staff, and I personally design awareness opportunities and create a safe space through multiple trainings and on different topics. The latest one that I did was called Understanding and Valuing Neurodiversity, which teaches everyone to recognize that we all have differences within our brains. For instance, ADHD or autism or depression or dyslexia. There's so many on the spectrum, and so teaching our employees how to learn to make sure everyone feels like that sense of belonging through understanding. And also, our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, we host quarterly culture conversations. And in those, we have our employees just sharing about different topics, things that's happening in the world, things that are happening around them. And they get to share their feelings with no judgment. And our other employees get to listen. You don't have to speak if you don't want to. You can just come and listen and really hear what's affecting our staff. And that helps bring more empathy and compassion. And it really speaks to our commitment at Advanced Group as, our commitment to people. And that's like really number one to us.
I think those are really good examples of really creating a dedicated space to speak, to listen, to have the opportunity to
Yes.
share and connect their storytelling and also education as well, and talking about a specific topic too. I know you
Mhm.
mentioned earlier kind of resolving conflict through dialogue, and
Yes.
I think around company culture too, it's everybody's responsibility. It's not Victoria's responsibility to make sure that the entire
Right.
organization is equitable and everybody is having a great experience as well. We all have a role to play, and I think especially leaders, people managers. How do you think about empowering folks across the organization to really have equity top of mind and practice equity driven leadership in their day to day processes?
Well, I think empowerment through training and by creating those safe spaces so that people can share their opinions and ideas. Also, learning about the needs of all of our demographics within the organization so that we know, what opportunities there are or even the gaps. I think that helps with an equity, driven organization.
Absolutely. I think having the tools, which includes training, and also feeling like you are supported by your team as well. You have that growth mindset too as an individual. I think consistently auditing the employee experience has also been really prominent, especially over the last few years when we had to be kind of creative by design and business as
Yes.
usual was out the window. Uh,
Mhm.
can you tell me about how you've redesigned a system to be more equitable over the past 2 years, whether it's a process, policy, or initiative?
Yeah, there's been many things, but a couple of things we've done have been around recruiting. And we updated our interview form so that leaders can't just say someone's not a fit, right? We hear that a lot in interviewing in days of old, where we say, oh, well, we're not hiring someone because they didn't fit within our organization. That word fit, we wanted to take out of our entire process. And if we did say fit, we wanted it to align with our values. So now on our interview form, and not recruiters, but managers, leaders, anyone interviewing, basically have to share why that person, if we didn't hire them, why they didn't align with our values. and then we list each one of our values. That way, it takes that word fit out of the equation, right? And then we can really share why wouldn't they fit within our culture. Also, we've done different things that show like how we equally hire and equitably hire, and our commitment to diversity on all of our job postings, on all of our websites. We post that information. We also offer different learning and development opportunities for our employees. So all of that fits into the design of our organization to make sure that, we've been more equitable, and each year we add on to it. So that's just a few examples.
Yeah, I feel like the conversation around moving away from culture fit to really culture add, and what do you mean by that as well, really operationalizing and having a structure for the interview process to have the opportunity to access different job opportunities as well, and really give managers, hiring managers, and anyone in that the process the tools to understand what are they asking, what are they looking for as well. I know this question also comes up a lot during these conversations, during the webinars we post. People want to know, how do I know if, we're doing a good job? How do I know if we are making progress? We know this doesn't happen overnight as well. What is your philosophy around measuring the impact of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging initiatives and strategies? Also recognizing, we are not fans of box checking here, but also what gets measured, gets done, and funded, and things like that.
Yes, well, you mentioned something earlier and you talked about being intentional. And I think we have to, at this point, is to be more intentional. So I really believe measurements are important in some aspects. So you can measure in many different ways. One way that we're doing it is through our exit interviews. So we've added two questions about diversity, equity, and inclusion and being treated fairly in our organization. So we added that to our exit interviews so that we can see, even when people leave our organization for various reasons, how did they think our diversity efforts played into that? We also added two DEI questions, or even more DEI questions to our engagement surveys that we issue annually, and so we want those staff members to say, how are we doing with our efforts? How do you feel about your leader answering diversity questions? How are your peers relating to you as far as DE&I? So you can really measure through those as well. Also adding like goals or measurements to our leaders or to our departments and tracking those annually. For instance, some leaders may say, well, I'm not hiring, so how can I have, diversity goals? Well, in that case, maybe their leaders may need training, right? They may need to go to an interview bias training or an unconscious bias training. Or, some leaders may need to hire a more diverse staff. For others, it may be adding more inclusion practices. So there's different ways of measuring engagement and productivity over time. So I am a fan of measurements, but again, you can do it in many different ways.
Exactly. What is your intention? What is your goal of measuring X? And also thinking about where you are as a company too. I think there is something to be said for quote unquote best practices, but at the end of the day, you have to look at kind of where you are too and think about kind of the goals you want to set realistically, aspirationally, and a continuous process too. Again, it's not, if you hit these goals, you're not working on it in 2024 and 2025. Victoria, I know I asked a lot of kind of questions about the work that you're doing at Advanced Group, and I want to ask from an industry perspective as well, 15 plus years of experience in HR and people,
Mhm.
DEI and social impact. Are there any common mistakes you see companies still making in their DEI and social impact strategy? And if so, what are some of the things that you're seeing?
I do, and I've made some myself, so I can definitely speak to this question. And I think trying to do everything at once, like setting too many goals. When you have too many goals, you tend not to get to any of them. And even if you do, say you accomplish all of your goals, you probably wouldn't have given your best to each one of those goals if there are too many. You may give like a half effort. to each goal. So you may have to start with smaller, more manageable goals, and then gain a commitment, and then just start. Just go for it. The key is starting. Many companies will put something on hold for, next year we'll look at that, or in 6 months we'll look at it. But I really think people should start and start now, like not put it off. Start with smaller, more manageable goals. And another mistake people make is not aligning DEI with your company mission. So I think that having the company mission align with your DEI mission helps to embed DEI within all of your business, within your entire company. And so sometimes people put it as like a side project or a side goal, but it really should be embedded right there within your company mission so that everyone takes it seriously, just like they do engagement, just like they do productivity or learning and development. Also, DEI should be at the top. So it should be a key pillar into your business, because everybody wants to take it seriously. And so if it's not there, they may just overlook it.
Absolutely. You need to prioritize, and also people can feel and tell if something is an afterthought or a side project as opposed to a key
Yes.
piece of the organization, something that leaders are talking about formally or informally. And, the decisions are being made with the basis of diversity, equity, and inclusion in mind as well. And just being proactive about that too. I think that in corporate America, there are a lot of different kind of terms and buzzwords or phrases that are used in relation to DEIB. Are there any that you feel are being overused or diluted, or that you're tired of hearing about? Why or why not?
Well, there's so many buzzwords. And I think until we reach a turning point in our practices, we will need to continue to use these words. But I think people are in this DEI like sort of fatigue because we use these terms all the time, but we don't see change in some industries or some companies. So I think that, if we use these phrases or buzzwords, for example, we can change some of them up, right? So instead of maybe saying privilege, we can talk about access, right? Instead of always saying the word inclusion, we can talk about representation. Instead of saying like colorblind, we can talk about being color brave. So there's different words that we can use that have similar meanings, but maybe have a different impact because it may be a new term that people haven't heard in the past. But definitely, I think we still need to use some of those terms until we kind of take a turning point in this journey, which is another word that is probably a buzzword that we overuse.
Uh, Words definitely have impact, and I think coming back to intentionality as well, that inclusive language, really thinking about what is the goal of what I'm trying to get across as well. I feel like I like asking that question because it's interesting to hear from people who are in it every day, kind of the words that you
Yeah.
use as well. Victoria, is there anything that I didn't specifically ask that you would like to share with folks who are listening, or underscore any key takeaways that you hope people really bring with them today?
Yeah, I really want people to know that it only takes one person to make a change. So a lot of times people will say, well, we need the backing of, so and so or X amount of people. It takes just one person to make a change. And my favorite quote is, be the change that you wish to see in this world. It only takes one person to be that change.
I think that is a really good call to action to end our conversation on. Victoria, thank you so much for being on Reimagining Company Culture this afternoon.
Thank you.
Of course, and as a reminder for folks who are listening, at All Voices, we really believe in employees and employers being really seen, heard, and understood, and know it's a requirement for the business to really succeed overall. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.